All right. The May 27th, 2025 School Board Special Meeting and Workshop is called to order. Ms. Tresky, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Cherry.
Present.
Mr. Link.
Present.
Ms. Quintana. Ms. Trigg.
Here.
Ms. Watkins. Dr. Jamison. Mrs. Apow.
Here. The board appreciates those joining us in person this evening at the William B. Robertson Administration Building. We also welcome those who are viewing the meeting via live stream on the division's YouTube page. So moving on to the approval of the agenda, is there a motion and a second to approve the revised agenda as amended? Please note that a closed session was removed.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Ms. Trigg, seconded by Mr. Cherry. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and the agenda passes. Moving on to the personnel list. Is there a motion and a second to approve the personnel list as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Cherry, seconded by Ms. Trigg. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the personnel list is approved. So, Dr. White, do you have any announcements?
I do, and good evening. Madam Vice Chair, members of the school board, members of the public, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mrs. Leslie Yeager, who has been recommended for and has accepted the position of principal of Monterey Elementary School. Thank you. Mrs. Yeager will start officially on July 1st, 2025. Currently, she serves as the assistant principal at Fishburne Park Elementary School. Mrs. Yeager holds a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communications from Francis Marion University and a Master in Education and Administration and Supervision from Liberty University. Prior to serving as the assistant principal at Fishburne Park Elementary School, Mrs. Yeager served in the following roles: assistant principal at James Madison Middle School, assistant principal at Lucy Addison Middle School, science teacher at Glenver and William Byrd High Schools in Roanoke County Public Schools, special education case manager and science teacher at Patrick Henry High School, science teacher and girls athletic coordinator at Euless Junior High School and Hurst Euless Bedford in Bedford Independent School District in Euless, Texas, instructional aide at Hurst Junior High School in Hurst Euless Bedford Independent School District in Hurst, Texas. All of these opportunities provided Mrs. Yeager with administrative leadership and teaching experience, which make her a great fit for this position. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Jamison, Vice Chair, Mrs. Abel, members of the board, student representatives, and Dr. White. Thank you for the opportunity to serve as principal of Monterey Elementary School. I look forward to working with the students, parents, community, and all stakeholders to ensure that we focus on utilizing our resources to provide effective first instruction for all students. This school already has a strong heart, and I am honored to become a part of it. At the elementary level, we have the unique privilege of shaping the very beginning of a child's educational journey. These are the years when curiosity blooms, confidence takes root, and character begins to grow. This role, I bring with me a deep belief in the power of the school community to shape the lives of those we serve. I have always believed that schools should be places where students feel seen, heard, and valued, where learning is rigorous, relationships are strong, and every child is given the opportunity to thrive every single day. At Monterey, my goal is to continue to build upon a culture where teachers are supported and empowered, where families are our true partners and teammates, and where students are inspired to not only meet expectations, but exceed them, academically, socially, and personally. At Monterey, we will continue to keep our students at the center of every decision we make. To the staff, families, and especially the students, thank you for welcoming me into your school family. My door will always be open, and I look forward to being inspired by each of you as we work side by side to continue to make Monterey Elementary School the very best place it can be. We will work together to continue to create rich, engaging classrooms filled with opportunities for students to grow. I am truly honored and excited to accept the role of principal at Monterey Elementary. I look forward to writing the next great chapter of Monterey School's story. Thank you again for this incredible opportunity and for trusting me in this role. I look forward to a year of limitless possibilities. Thank you all again very much. I appreciate it.
Congratulations. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
All right, moving into the superintendent's reports. Dr. White, please provide your updates.
All right, very good. Good evening again. So this evening, we're bringing forward items for your information, including an update on the strategic plan and an update on the fiscal year 26 budget. But before we get to our agenda items, I would like to highlight a few items for the board and for the public's information. Registration is now open for our Staying Safe by Staying Connected camp and for community builders. And so keep in mind what those, programs are, keeping kids safe through athletics programs, arts, and then community builders. Those are our middle school kids as well. So just stay tuned to that and check that out, because I'm sure that that's something that you may want your kids to be to be connected to this summer. This year, our Staying Safe by Staying Connected camp will be held for 1 week in July and will feature athletics, career exploration, and fine arts. This provides the opportunity for current 5th through 8th graders to try out various sports, including football, soccer, volleyball, and more, as well as learn about other life skills. Now, our Community Builders program, which will start its second year of a 2-year pilot, is for rising 8th graders, and it's a month-long camp focused on leadership, career exploration, and academics. So participants will also be able to continue programming throughout the school year at their middle schools. So registration information, as I said before, is available on the RCPS website in the orange bar. Now, auditions have closed for this summer's Staying Safe by Staying Connected Summer Stock Academy, and the cast list will be shared next week. I'm so pleased to announce that this year we had more than 70 students submit auditions to be a part of the Little Mermaid Junior, so congratulations on that number of students who auditioned for it. Performances will be on June 26th and 27th, so mark your calendars for that. So I encourage everyone to come out for those performances. We know that they're going to be fabulous. They always, always are. As a reminder, schools will dismiss 2 hours early on the last day of school next Thursday. I can't believe we're there already, June 5th. And in addition, William Fleming's graduation will be held at 10 a.m. on June 5th, and Patrick Henry's graduation will be held at 10 a.m. on June 6th. Both will be held at the Berglund Center. The ceremonies will also be streamed live on our YouTube channel, and additional details are available on our website and on social media. We can't wait to celebrate our seniors, and I hope that everyone has a safe and restful summer break this summer. Now, last week and this afternoon, I had the privilege of attending the pinning and stole ceremony for our AVID seniors. Now, as a reminder, AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination, and it is a program that I brought here to Roanoke City and that we started 4 years ago, and to equip our students with the skills that they need to be successful in college and in career. It teaches things like how to take Cornell notes and the difference between studying and doing homework, right? As high school students, we remember that we did our homework, but when you get to college, you realize, okay, I have to do my homework, but I also have to, I have to learn how to buckle down and study for long periods of time. It teaches them how to build a resume, how to apply for scholarships, how to make sure that they show up on time and sit in the front of the classroom, all of those things that make a difference in the success in college and in the workforce, quite frankly. And so we're just so proud, and I am so proud of our seniors who have completed the program, and I'm thankful to Mrs. Desper and to Ms. Harrington for leading these initiatives at each of our high schools. Now, we had students who gave kind of their testimony, if you will, at each high school stole ceremony. And so we kind of snagged one of the speeches from one of our students, Zamira Thomas. And Mr. Freeman, I think you have a copy, right? I'd like for you to read what she shared today. It was really pretty powerful.
Good evening, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. White. Just a few things. I know Dr. White mentioned the name Zamaria, but she had another engagement she had to go to tonight. But Renaya Sherman also delivered a speech, and that's the one that she sent to me. Says, good afternoon, friends, visitors, students, and staff. Allow me a moment of vulnerability with you all. Throughout my 4 years at William Fleming High School, I never felt like I truly fit in the atmosphere. For 3 years, I felt like there was no one to hold on to, rely, or fall back on. Friends, teachers, and coaches came and gone with the wind. For 3 years, I felt like just another student on a roster. But then I was given a chance to be a part of the AVID program, the AVID family, if you will. AVID wasn't just another class on my schedule. It became a beacon of light and hope. A place where I wasn't just a name and a number on paper. I was seen, heard, and valued. It was a room where we weren't afraid to talk about our ambitions, no matter how far off they seemed. AVID was a safe space where we picked each other up when life got hard and senioritis started to bite. In the center of all, that was our Mrs. Harrington. Ms. Harrington, you didn't just teach us how to write a resume or apply to college. You spoke life into us and taught us how to believe in ourselves, even when we weren't sure we could. You saw potential in all of us, not just as students, but as people with stories, struggles, and goals. You've shown me what it means to be passionate, persistent, and to lead with heart. Your words, your patience, and your unwavering support are etched into who I am now. Because of AVID, I stand here proud of what I've accomplished and hopeful for what comes next. So thank you to Ms. Harrington and the team here at Daytech for giving me a home in your classroom and for reminding me every single day that I belong. The people say home is where the heart is, and my heart now forever lies within the four walls of Daytech Room 207, AVID. Thank you. I'm a senior and will be attending Virginia State University in the fall.
All right.
Imagine there was hardly a dry eye in the room. So, again, I just want to thank the school board for your support of AVID and all of our other college and career readiness, workforce readiness programs to support our students. And so I know you're looking forward to graduation just like I am. It's our Super Bowl. And so we're just looking forward to that and looking forward to celebrating all of our seniors as well as our AVID seniors. So to begin our report this evening, I will ask Dr. Jonathan Schultz, Executive Director of Accountability and Strategic Initiatives, to present an update on the strategic plan revision process. So, Dr. Schultz.
Do my slides just start? There we go. Okay. Sorry, I'm not used to the new place yet. Good evening, Madam Vice Chair Pell, members of the board, Superintendent White. Here, kind of culminating the end of this months-long process, we're coming to the finish line in terms of the strategic plan revision. So just wanted to remind you of a few key things. If we look at the timeline, we remember that the work started back in October. Right now we're coming to the end of May, so we are looking at the kind of the end of our public feedback gathering section. We'll be coming back to you at the June meeting for final approval of the plan. And at that point, we'll get started working on the website, which we hope to have up and running in July. Thinking about the different public feedback that we've reached out to try to get over the past couple of months, you can see a list of the different groups that we've worked with, including our two big public sessions that we had at Patrick Henry and William Fleming. Tonight, you're also going to have in front of you a sneak peek at the pretty version or the final version that will be coming to you. So each of you has a large, if you've seen it in many different pieces and crosswalks and different chunks, but now you can get a pretty good idea in front of you of what it's going to look like. And you'll have an opportunity through the rest of this week, if you take a look at the plan and you have any suggestions or final edits or suggestions for improvements or things that you want to see changed, if you can get those to us by the end of the week, by the end of the day on Friday, that'll give us enough time to go back to the graphic designer and have everything in your board packet for June 5th. In addition, tonight, one of the things we want to do is talk about some of the feedback that we've been receiving from the public and identify a couple of key themes of things that we've been hearing about, and just point out to you some highlights of where they are being addressed in the plan, and that'll give you a chance to also give you a reason to kind of go through the document as well. So, sorry, let me just mention what a couple of those key ones were. So essentially, the themes for the feedback flow pretty nicely with the pathways, right? So addressing and assessing student needs and expanding access to advanced courses in CTE fits very well with Pathway 1. Preventing bullying and student-staff relationships and strength of those relationships fits well with Pathway 2. And then the staff ones fit well with Pathway 4 in terms of recruitment and retention. So the first piece that we heard about was, heard some multiple comments related to making sure that we know our kids and that we are matching our resources to the kids. So I feel, one of the things I like about the plan is I feel like we do a nice job of sticking to Dr. White's message of knowing that students by name, need, and strength. And so you can see some of the strategies that we have in our Closing the Achievement Gap strategy related to trying to come up with personalized plans for students and also making sure that we're matching the resources to the need. In addition, if we're going to be able to address a student needs, we need to be able to assess those needs. And so as part of our nurturing environment, we are specifically seeking for the opportunity for students to provide input, and so we can hear their voices and we know what those needs are. We have several of those structures in place, like our board representatives and our superintendent's student advisory council, but we also want to look for more opportunities along those lines. And then to kind of tie that back together, along with our objective for well-rounded students, we don't just want to know about their strengths academically, but we also want to personalize our opportunities for them, for the whole student, including their, the things that they're interested in outside of just the straight academic side of things. As I mentioned, we had feedback from multiple pieces of feedback that said that we wanted to make sure that we were continuing to expand our advanced course offerings and our CTE offerings. But we had what I think are some important distinctions, and that is when you look at our strategies, it is not just about trying to get more kids in the classes. It is trying to make sure that more kids are ready to be successful in those classes. So making sure that we are developing student-centered supports that make sure that we increase the awareness of those opportunities, that we have helped kids plan so that they've taken the courses they need to have access to those courses, and then support them while they're enrolled in those courses to ultimately increase the student success. And that we want to make sure we're attacking that in both the advanced placement dual enrollment courses, but CTE as well. One of the big things that we heard about was making sure that we are preventing and responding to bullying. So we have two specific ways that I want to talk about tonight in terms of that aspect in Pathway 2, which is our well-being and overall well-being and sense of community pathway. And so under our nurturing environment goal, we have some specific pieces of making sure that we called out our provision of comprehensive mental health services for students, but also that we are providing opportunities for students to talk about and get share their concerns, have an adult that they can talk to, making sure they have that strong adult connection in the school, that they know who to go to for help in those situations. On the other side of addressing bullying, we also want to make sure that we are, on the sense of community side, that we want to have specific strategies in place to address bullying and internal conflict, about how we're teaching students, how we're teaching them to interact and resolve those conflicts, and how we address that. And ultimately, that comes back to how we handle bullying and as through our discipline pieces, right? So we want to make sure that we are investing in proactive, positive discipline, having alternatives just to suspensions, and investing in things like restorative programming and multi-tiered systems of support, or a system of supports. And then just to tie the bow together, to go from making sure we have those strong staff relationships and we're addressing bullying by making sure the students are feeling connected, that we want to have specific counseling efforts related to making sure that we are providing career counseling, but also extracurricular and connection counseling for students to know that they have are aware of and have ways to stay connected to the school. And we also want to make sure that we are celebrating student achievements, not just academics and athletics, but all of the other great things that we have going on for that well-rounded student. And then in addition, we are aware that if we want to build strong relationships with students, between students and the school, it's also about building partnerships with the families, right? It's not just the kid at the school having the relationship with that positive adult, but it's also that overall relationship. And so that's why under our achievement gap, our goal related to closing the achievement gap, we have actually targeted a strategy, not just an academic strategy, but a strategy related to building strong connections to the families, our students' families. And then the last section of feedback was focused on the HR side, basically making sure that we have strong communication between staff and administration. And so we have put that specifically as a strategy to make sure that we have those regular channels in place. So, we currently have the Constituent Services Office, but we also want to make sure that we want to make sure everybody knows about that and uses it, but we also want to make sure that we explore other opportunities there as well to make sure that staff knows that they're being heard and that they're valued. And then the final piece related to making sure that we are recognizing our employees, that benefits and pay are important, but finding ways to highlight people for the great work that they do is a key piece of retention, and we want to make sure that stays front and center. And then finally, the last piece is that we do want to make sure we are demonstrating that commitment to competitive salaries and benefits, and by making sure that we have specific strategies in our strategic plan to analyze the market, make sure that we know where we are relative to other divisions, and also make sure that we know what our employees want and need in their packages. What are the things that they're looking for, and that we're using that to shape our compensation and benefits packages. So those are that's just a quick run through of some of the key types of feedback that we've received. I know that what happened to me when I got the pretty copy in front of me was that I ended up rabbit holing very quickly. Just kind of there's a lot to look at. There's a lot to pay attention to. Dr. White clearly had spent a lot of time with the plan. We had lots of detailed feedback. So I hope that we try to give you a nice big version and some time so that you can dig in. I hope that you have a chance to look at it. I'm proud of the work that our team has done. I think we've, if our goal was clarity and alignment and accountability, I think that we have taken some good steps in that direction. So I hope that you can take some time over the rest of this week. And if you have any suggestions or other feedback, please make sure that you can get it to me.
We can certainly take any questions or comments that you have at this time, but we also want to give you time before we're asking you to take action on it the next time. We try not to ask you to take action the same night that we're presenting it. So we wanted to give you a hard copy of the draft tonight as well as the presentation so that you can see what kind of feedback we've gotten and how we've incorporated that feedback so that you have time to read through it and you have time to formulate any other questions or suggestions that you might have for us prior to us asking for your vote at the next meeting. But any
Ms. Trigg, we'll start with you if you have any comments or questions.
So far from what I've looked at and gathered, it looks very good. Your team is doing a very good job. I think it's very considerate of looking at some of the different aspects, especially with what's going on with the bullying. So I do like that we have an approach put in place for that.
Thank you. Ms. Watkins?
Questions. Thank you so much. This is super comprehensive.
Mr. Link?
I was just going to say, sorry, it sounds like you got a significant amount of public feedback, which I'm glad to hear we got. Are you comfortable with the amount of public feedback that we got on the document?
We would always like to hear more, right? I think based on the fact that we were in a, kind of a mid-plan revision, which was not necessarily the full rollout, that everything that was in the plan was already approved with major community feedback in 2022.
Right.
So we'd always like to have more, but in general, I think we got some very thoughtful feedback that, often you get feedback and sometimes it takes a while to sort of unpack it and figure out how to get it in the plan. And instead, in this case, we had some multiple very specific things. The CTE advanced placement one was perfect, of just saying, hey, I'm not sure. The feedback basically said, we're not sure that just increasing enrollment is the goal. The goal is increasing the success rate. And so that led directly into a very detailed statement. So yeah, overall, I think we got very helpful feedback.
And I would like to thank other kind of entities that let us kind of crash their party.
Yes.
So when we had some of the parent feedback or just community feedback sessions that we realized that those meetings were lighter than we expected, then PTA, Central Council PTA, again, they allowed us to become a part of their agenda, and our STAC, our Teacher Advisory Council, allowed us to present the plan to them. So I'm so appreciative of the other kinds of groups that allowed us to get before them, because we wanted to make sure that we got the plan in front of as many parents, teachers, students as we could, so that we could incorporate their feedback. So where we might have been light on one side, we tried to incorporate other opportunities on the other side. So many thanks to those groups.
Mr. Link, anything else?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Mr. Cherry?
Yeah, so awesome job. Very awesome work in pivoting and being intentional. The word I see a lot in this strategic plan is community. So I really love that, from overall well-being and sense of community to community engagement. So I really love that ending on it takes a community. I like that overall theme there. Just appreciative of everybody who spoke up from the public, and then us being able to listen and make the necessary adjustments. So this is great work, and I'm excited about seeing this vision come to pass.
Yes, and I really did note that not just noting enrollment increase in the AP and dual enrollment and CT classes, but providing the support so that you're ensuring success, because that's what we want, is the diploma and the resume as they walk out the door. I also appreciated the multiple feedback mechanisms that Dr. White mentioned. It's a theme that, as a division, we work hard to gather feedback, and I think we continue to see that with over 1,800 submissions for the calendar survey, for example, or when there is an opportunity to speak at our meetings, people come and they give us information. That's just good for us to hear. And so I appreciate all of that. And so again, I encourage, make sure board members that we take a look, because this is going to help direct our next 3 years. By Friday, you said May 30th, and we just
If
submit
possible, that'd be great.
straight to you.
That'd be great. In whatever format is convenient for you.
Wonderful. So, but good work to the team, and thank you very much.
And many thanks to you, Dr. Schultz, and to your team, and especially to make sure that when we have received the feedback, that you've been able to synthesize it in a way where parents, teachers, students can actually see those changes, and so that they're incorporated in the plan. And I know that this has been a very long, very tedious process, but many thanks not only to your team, but to our entire team, because it takes the entire division to come through and to say, all right, are we up to date? Are we current? Does the plan still make sense? And do we need to make adjustments? So thanks to you. Thank you, Dr. Schultz. All right, so tonight also, Madam Vice Chair, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the FY26 budget update. So tonight, Chief Financial Officer Kathleen Jackson will present an update on our fiscal year 26 budget process. Now, what you will hear Mrs. Jackson present tonight will involve a discussion about the use of your fund balance. And as you know, these are temporary one-time funds that we're proposing to use to provide us with more time to plan long-term, particularly given the ongoing budget process discussions. Before we get to that, Mrs. Apel and Mr. Cherry, as representatives of our school board budget committee, have been working to create a history of the fund balance to better understand why and how the fund balance was first created and how it has been used over the years. So before Mrs. Jackson presents, I'd first like to turn it over to Mrs. Apel and to Mr. Cherry so that we can hear about the history of the fund balance.
Thank you very much, Dr. White. Mr. Cherry?
Yeah, so again, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Today we are going to take a journey through the history of the Roanoke City Public Schools fund balance, how it has evolved over time, what it's been used for, and how it's been positioned, or how it's positioned us for the future. And I do want to thank our Vice Chair, Dr. White, and Ms. Kathleen Jackson for your incredible hard work and ongoing conversations in regard to this, because it is a hot topic, and just wanted to prepare this report as a means of transparency and just giving a little bit of backstory and context tonight. So,
Thank you very much. So basically, we're going to start at 2000 as just a good place to start to get our bearing for our modern fund balance history. So in the year 2000, you can see that we had a fund balance, we carried a fund balance of about 1.6 million. And there were a number of uses, designated uses for this fund balance at that time. And that include things like reserved for encumbrances, designated for workers' compensation, designated for capital equipment, designated for uninsured claims. So there were dollar amounts that were earmarked for use, and that's what the fund balance was reserved for. Now, what we're going to do as we go through this history is try to provide some historical context for those of us who are newer to the board. 2000 was before I was even married, let alone had children or lived in Roanoke. So this will help us all have a good working understanding of what the fund balance is, how it has been used, and how it got us to here. So what we're going to do, Mr. Chair and I will highlight particular years of note where things may have changed or evolved in a certain way of note for all of us and for the public, and discuss those as we go.
right. So in 2009, which you mentioned 2009 is the year I graduated high school. All right. 2009 is kind of the introduction for our undesignated fund balance. So by 2009, you started to see a shift. If you can go previously, all right, that fund balance was $1,645,765, and then reserved for the encumbrances was $824,718. So in 2009, fund balance is $9,201,007. Reserved for encumbrances, zero. Undesignated, $1,816,550. All right, so even in that year, there were still designations for workers' comp, capital equipment, uninsured claims, but now OPEB, which stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, which was added in 2008. All right, so what we saw in 2009 was the first year we saw an undesignated balance. So that question becomes why? Where did it come from? The division discontinued its reserve for encumbrances, and we also saw slightly higher than expected revenues, but the economy was starting to decline around that time. So we all remember what 2009 kind of looked like, 2008, and the state support for education began to become weak. All right.
I should have skipped ahead for you.
Oh, you're good.
So we come to 2010 to 2012, which we like to kind of consider the meals tax era, which is something that has been mentioned in the past. So you can see here how the fund balance during those years grew. Now, additionally, the undesignated line item in the fund balance also grew. Now, of note, too, is that just because we stopped, as a division, stopped identifying things or earmarking things as reserved for encumbrances, it does not mean that the system, that the division wasn't still encumbering costs that were to be expected in future years. We had just changed some policies and procedures about how the accounting for that was done. And Ms. Jackson could speak to that just a little bit. This would be a good time.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, really that does identify kind of a strategic change in our administrative leadership at the time to move away from carrying forward encumbrances across fiscal years and really to have a hard stop at June 30 to close the expenditures in one year and start fresh in another year. So to some extent, we're still doing the same thing. It was just the choice of how we reflect those costs and have kind of a clean break from one fiscal year to the next. So rather than reflect some encumbrances, and basically what that is referring to is that, let's say in June, we begin a purchase that is we're not going to be done with that project until July or August. That those funds are encumbered when we enter into that contract or we issue a purchase order to a vendor. Those funds are encumbered. And so if we were to carry forward those encumbrances across fiscal years, then you would have funds reserved for those encumbrances at year end in the current year, and then you would continue to spend those funds in the subsequent fiscal year as that project is completed. That was the point when our financial leaders at that time decided that we wanted to kind of have a clean break. So we would close any encumbrances that were still open at June 30. If the project still needed to go on, we would start fresh with a new purchase order in the new fiscal year. And any encumbered funds would therefore be released and become part of that unassigned fund balance for then the school board to make a determination if we're going to keep moving with that project. Those funds would potentially be available to help complete that project in the subsequent year.
And also a point of clarification, the term unassigned fund balance and undesignated fund balance we're basically using synonymously in this case, correct?
Yes, yeah. In our audited financial statements, you'll see unassigned or assigned. So those are sort of the official terms of when our auditors look at those dollars and determine whether the school board has taken action to assign them for a particular purpose or whether that has not happened, and therefore there's more flexibility with those funds. So that is what that means, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. So to continue with that, so you'll note that between 2010 and 2012, there were additional designated uses, changes, and notable line items in the fund balance that was carried to include capital equipment, textbook adoption, and then, of course, the undesignated line item. So as Ms. Jackson was referring to, the school board would have taken action to say, we're going to designate funds for textbook adoption. It's not a free-for-all. It's not funds that are used for nimble purposes. They were actually earmarked for a specific purpose during that year, but we did carry a fund balance. But there are other things that, as a division, as we'll talk about when we look at our budget update, where we keep in mind that there are expenses that are coming, but we haven't necessarily taken a board action to earmark those funds for that specific purpose as we go. And you'll also notice here, we've only highlighted the overall fund balance and the undesignated fund balance line items, but you'll see there is a discrepancy, and that discrepancy is accounted for by the designated expenses that were already outlined there, including capital equipment, or OPEB, as Mr. Cherry previously mentioned. So as we look at context, it might look on the face of it that, oh, the fund balance is growing so much, but in the broader context, this is not our overall general budget as a system. The overall general budget of the system was experiencing a drawdown of state support for education overall, as far as that budget goes. And as part of that, the school division was trying to contract its budget and its expenditures to include, this is around when Ruffner and Raleigh Court Elementary School closed in 2009. In order to help buffer those losses from the state side with regards to support, City Council implemented a meals tax increase known as the 2 for 2 initiative, or the Eat for Education campaign, where they were increasing the meals tax from 5% to 7%, and those proceeds then went to specifically build the undesignated line item for the fund balance. And it also makes sense in that context that it would be undesignated because the school division at that time needed the flexibility with regards to their funds because of the uncertainty of the funds or the lack of funds or the significant drawdown of the funds from the state level. So additionally, while the fund balance grew as a result of the meals tax, the hope was only to cover half of the deficit of the budget from the state. So it wasn't to help make us whole, it was just to help keep us afloat. Now, so there was an emphasis by City Council for us to build up that fund balance, also keeping in mind, and there are multiple references to this during our joint City Council School Board meeting minutes from this era of do the schools have a plan for when the meals tax increase would sunset? And indeed it did sunset. Also, to give context during this time, that would also impact the amount of fund balance that was able to be built up, was the revision of the funding formula for the schools to what was the long-standing 40% that has been referenced to up to this year. So then in 2013, we see that the fund balance has been built up to 35 million and some change, and the undesignated line item has been built up to about 26 million. Now, there were additional designated uses during that time that were added to our fund balance to include designated for employee compensation increases. Now, this is something that, again, was noted by, I believe it was the assistant superintendent at the time, that this is not a sustainable use of fund balance, but it was something to help us during this time when we had been able to build up fund balance and to deal with things like teacher shortages and the drawdown on the state financial support in the budget. So it was always a conversation about how to draw down on these funds and how to use them responsibly between council and the board. So other context in 2013, we have the meals tax increase was sunset, and this is the peak value of our undesignated fund balance through the years, even to present time. Around this time is also when RCPS Plus, that summer program, began. We also, if you can go look in board docs yourself, and you can go back and see at our monthly school board meetings, Ms. Jackson presents a fund balance status in our financial statements, and around 2013 is where we start to see these on a regular monthly basis. And of note also is that as we budget, and it's been noted that since at least 2000, which was just a good starting point, we've carried a fund balance and it's been used in our budgets. So the fund balance use is included as a line item in our annual budgets, just as we'll see tonight when we discuss what are we choosing with our flexibility, if offered, what are we choosing to use the fund balance cover versus state funds, federal funds, local funds. And that is submitted with our budgets to City Council. And also at this time, you can go back and historically see that RCPS expected to draw down approximately $26 million out of the fund balance by the end of fiscal year 2014-15. So they basically expected to draw down a lot of this in those couple of years. So now there's a lot of further context that you can go back and you can see, okay, year by year, just like we do as Ms. Jackson reports monthly on where are we with our fund balance use. If we were projected to use 4 million, have we used it all? Are we going to need more? Do we need less? And some of the things that impacted that we didn't draw down as much as expected was there were teacher shortages. So there just wasn't as much needed in the budget to compensate employees. So, and when we talk about other things, there's always other factors that go into what your actual expenses are versus your projected. So then in 2017, you can see that the fund balance is now drawn down to 22 million. We still have the undesignated line item, but in 2017, an additional designated use was that the minimum fund balance required by the school board of $10 million was added. So, and that is technically undesignated, but now it's a required reserve. So at that time, the school board looked into implementing this new policy requiring a minimum balance that would be kept, just like if you had a minimum balance in, say, your checking or savings account. There were cash flow trends that were examined during the past fiscal years that noted swings in our cash flow of up to $21 million in the negative, just from having to pay out grants before you get reimbursed, payroll, debt servicing, things like that. So just the normal cash flow, even though your expenses and your revenues will line up by the end of the year, that doesn't mean that they line up at every point during the year. In fact, that sometimes required the use of a line of credit for the schools, depending on the balance in our general fund. Also around this time, for context, there was a significant increase in the cost of just maintaining an unsecured line of credit from $5,000 to $60,000, which also helped prompt the board at the time to say, is there a better, more responsible way for us to deal with these cash flow issues? Best practices were researched in comparison to other divisions, and it was also noted that not all divisions carry fund balances for various reasons in their localities. So as a result, policy DBA, which is our school board policy that requires a minimum fund balance, was passed in 2017.
Right, so that brings us to 2020 to 2022, which we call it the COVID era, all right? And quite simply, the pandemic changed everything for us as a division. All right, so there were key uses during this time between 2020 and 2022. Funds were restricted for SNAP performance agreements in 2020 and 2021. Committed funds went toward purchasing and renovating the AOC building. This COVID era, this pandemic era, also marked the Equity in Action Destination 2030 project launch, a reimagined capital development plan requested by City Council. And then, most notably, most importantly, in 21 and 22, the division created a new capital fund, all right? And the question becomes, around this time, why did we create a capital fund? Simply this, to reduce reliance on city bond funding, all right? So federal pandemic grants drove a significant increase in the fund balance. All right, I think I need to say that again. All right, federal pandemic grants drove a significant increase in our fund balance. So we were at 27 million in 21, up from 13.8 million the previous years, with schools only being partially open. All right, operating costs dropped, allowing funds to be preserved. All right, so these reserves, they allowed the division to commit to year 22 teacher raises early and attract and retain educators amid staffing shortages. All right, so that'll bring us to 24. All right, you want me to go ahead? I'll go ahead. Okay, so, okay. All right, so continued strategic use. In 24, the minimum fund balance was adjusted. All right, funds were committed for transitional calls. Major facility updates were completed, including Breckenridge and Morningside additions and the opening of Daytech. All right, so looking ahead, we did all of this, and by 2025, what we're now sitting in this building, we're literally sitting and witnessing the fruit of long-term strategy. All right, so that's over 3 years of a functioning capital fund. The William B. Robertson building has opened. We're sitting in it. The Community Empowerment Center is set to open soon. Preston Park Elementary School is in the middle of mid-construction. That's something that our superintendent loves to say, and I agree. Promises made, promises kept. Okay, so we have additional projects that are currently in motion as we speak: roofs, HVAC systems, paving, playgrounds, flooring, and security upgrades. So what I would like to do in conclusion, are you good, Franny? Okay, so in conclusion, I want to end with this. The RCPS fund balance has evolved from a static reserve into a dynamic financial tool, helping us weather downturns, respond to crises, and invest in our future. From meals taxes to minimum reserves and from COVID recovery to capital projects, this history shows the power of strategic financial planning in supporting education for generations to come. All right, this kind of strategic planning requires synergy between both school board and city council. All right, so while we understand hard decisions have to be made on the city side, let it be known that council has always been transparent, upfront, and communicative regarding funding. So I just wanted to end on that note because, Franny, I think you hit the nail on the head from previous joint board minutes that there has always been an overwhelming sense of support from city council when it comes to our school division. So just wanted to give a history and a context when it comes to our fund balance history, and I hope this has been somewhat helpful tonight.
So, I didn't think about questions. Are there any questions? We can start at Mr. Link this side.
No, thank you.
Ms. Trigg,
Questions, very thorough, I love it.
Ms. Watkins.
I just wanted to thank everyone involved in doing the research. This is a lot of research. I've been here for 6 years of it, and it's, all very accurate, sound. I was in some of those conversations, in those joint meetings. I was on the budget committee for a time, and you guys you did a lot of work summarizing a lot of collaboration between the city and the school board, a lot of work on both sides, a lot of communicating and collaborating, advocating on both sides for our city and for our families and students, teachers, or staff. Thank you.
Barry, anything you wanted to add?
Yes, there is something I want to add. I stayed up every night past my bedtime. Those that know, I go to bed early. I've been going to bed past 10 and 11 o'clock working on this, and I thank Franny and Dr. White and Kathleen again and our team for how we've collaborated and partnered to make sure we get this thorough information out. So again, thank you all again.
And just to close, I also appreciated the chance to delve into and really, discover how far back a robust collaborative relationship between council and board, the school board goes, and also to see that things evolve over time and we lose historical or institutional knowledge as people turn over. That is just the nature of time passing. But it also means, as the board, as good fiscal stewards, if we need to have further discussions about how about how we deal with our fund balance. Like, for example, do we want to reinstitute putting in a line item that's where it's designated reserved for encumbrances? Do we want to break down further that undesignated line item? Will that help with transparency or planning in these times? These are things that we discuss as a board so that we can help move the school division forward to meet the goals of our strategic plan as outlined tonight, and then the next one that comes after that, and the one that comes after that. So, so I appreciate everybody's time tonight, and we will now turn it over to our active budget update. Oh, before that, Mr. Link, one other thing.
I did come up with a question.
Okay.
So based on the notes we had on the screen, in 2017, we were seeing fiscal swings as high as $21 million in a budget year.
Yes.
And a quick inflation calculation brings that to 27 million in 2025. Was the $21 million value, adjusted for modern dollars or whatever, a high point, or was that typical of most years? Should we be concerned that our fund balance is not high enough to cover our fiscal swings?
Well, I will note that from previous minutes that it was also requested of the finance department to try to minimize the swings.
Okay.
that 21 million was the highest,
Okay.
about the highest that had happened therein. However, yes, Ms. Jackson, do you want to speak to the logistics of cash flow during the year?
I will say, and that is something that we've looked at recently as there's been discussion of what our fund balance might look like and might change, that we have taken a look at what our more recent swings have been. And I would say, I don't have those exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think about 21 million, might have been as much as 23 million, was about the biggest that we saw in the last couple of years.
In
And-
modern dollars.
Correct, in modern dollars, and even the most recent years, we were able to get it down a little smaller than that. I will say, to some extent, I believe that, some of our bigger swings in the last few years, we had a large influx of federal pandemic relief dollars. All of that has to be spent up front before you can request reimbursement. So I believe that would account for a lot of that variance. Now those funds are gone, that time period is over, and so we have seen that the largest variance we've experienced in the fiscal year in the last year or so, I believe was closer to maybe about 15 million. But still, that I think your point is very well taken, that is something we have to keep an eye on in terms of our required reserve at this point is just over 12 million, and based on our projections for next year's budget, that would only go up to about 13.3. So,
Should we be talking about increasing our minimum fund balance?
so,
That is something just, I believe I saw around 6.7 or 6.9% or something was, it's been debated between like, do we do it at a percent? I know the first year, there wasn't actually enough in the fund to go by a percent, so that's why they went a dollar amount of 10 million. But yes, there's been a conversation about that.
right, and that's when the policy changed, and I can't remember your date, was that 2017 maybe, where we did take that into consideration. For a few years there, it was 10 million, it was always 10 million, and then the school board at that time said, hey, wait a minute, after a while, 10 million doesn't get you as much as it did when we first adopted this policy. So that's when we put that additional piece into that policy, where we would look at inflation and enrollment and make adjustments on an annual basis, so.
And I believe I think in this presentation, it has 13.3
Correct.
as the reserve would be the required reserve
That's
for
correct,
this year.
for next year.
Already adjusted.
Yes.
And if the fund balance were insufficient to cover a swing flow we were to have, and what would the procedure then be to make sure that we're meeting our obligations?
I think that goes to be managed in two ways. So as we was shared earlier, part of it is making sure that there's enough money in the bank to cover, but also for my team to take responsibility for how we manage that cash flow in terms of when money goes out and that sort of thing. So I think there are certainly levers that we can pull right now. For example, we try to make sure that we get grant reimbursements done on a quarterly basis. That seems to work well for us, that we want to make sure that we're kind of have a steady flow in requesting reimbursement. We could certainly move that up and try to do that, say, monthly if we had to. So there are some things, but if we certainly were in just a dire situation where all of those levers would not be enough, then that would be a conversation for us to have with city finance and the treasurer's office.
Okay. Okay.
To make sure that we don't have anything catastrophic happen, like a bounce check.
Okay.
Right, and of note with the line of credit, it was discussed historically that the cost went up. That was just of holding the line of credit, not actually the
Right, that's the
interest
interest
on the
charges,
credit that
right.
had to be used while you were waiting to be paid back for funds you knew you were getting.
Yes.
So-
Yeah, because that was an unsecured line, so there was a cost to that because we don't have assets that we could put up for collateral. Our buildings are the property of the city, not schools. So that was kind of the issue there that I think, I don't remember the exact specifics, but I'm not sure if there was a banking change or just a philosophy change with the bank that they were not willing or able to kind of put that up without us providing some kind of funding to support that, since it would have been an unsecured loan. So that was obviously a good conversation, that maybe that's not a good use of taxpayer dollars to just be paying for the line of credit on the off chance that we might need it.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll just chime in just to say that, again, thank you, Mrs. Apel, Mr. Cherry, as well as for serving on the school board's budget committee, first of all, and for giving this lesson. I want to thank the entire school board for kind of diving in deeply to this very important topic, because tonight in particular, we're going to, again, I'll just reemphasize the fact that tonight, Mrs. Jackson is going to take us through, you're going to discuss tonight, and we are going to discuss a significant use of fund balance. But I think it's important for us to keep in mind, and it was important for us to have this lesson because, you know, you can hear how the definitions, how at one point in time we were saying kind of reserved for encumbrances, and you know, sometimes it's called unassigned, sometimes it's called undesignated, but we're using those terms interchangeably. But whatever we're calling it, right, it's one-time funding. And so we're talking about temporary, kind of a temporary fix for ongoing expenses, which is not our typical practice. But this, we're going to present this tonight to give us some time, really, for planning and for making sure that we're being able to continue some of the key projects and programs that we have in place. But I do want to just keep at the forefront of your mind that whatever we're discussing tonight, that we're going to ask for your approval on to come June 10th, we do need to keep all of that in mind for the next fiscal season and beyond, because there will be a cliff effect when it comes to the fund balance. And so I just want to thank you for that kind of history lesson, especially as we approach the next report, which is the update on the board. And thank you also for providing the context, because we can see year over year, there's a rhyme or reason, right? So just because it says that it's unassigned or undesignated doesn't mean that those funds aren't earmarked for other kind of purposes. So Mrs. Jackson, why don't you come on up, and we'll, yes, there's the clicker, and we will talk about finalizing the 25-26 budget. And so for that, Mrs. Jackson, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. And before I get into that, if I could sort of echo Dr. White and just thank Mrs. Apel and Mr. Cherry. I know our school board clerk, Kim Trusky, was very involved in a whole lot of research. I worked for the schools for 19 years, not always in this exact role, but I learned a lot in what you shared as well. I mean, I really appreciate you digging into that history to give us that background and context. So that was very, very useful and beneficial to all of us. Thank you. So as Dr. White said, we'll now sort of jump ahead. We've had a lot of history and up to present day, and so now we'll kind of turn our attention to the coming budget that approval date for which is fast approaching. So looking into kind of where we stand on our development of the 25-26 budget. And I just wanted to start with kind of where we are in terms of authorization and that sort of thing. At the May 12th City Council meeting, the City Council did approve the city's budget for next year, which included appropriating funds for school use, $275 million for general school operations and $13.5 million for the school food service operations. So just as a reminder, we cannot exceed those amounts. That would require additional action on the part of council, and it would require money that we don't have. So, so I just put that out there, that those are some numbers that I'm sure that you've heard, and that we are certainly grateful for the City Council for taking that action to allow us to then move forward with final approval of the school board budget. So as Dr. White said, we have the use of fund balance, or basically one-time money, kind of money in savings, prior year savings that is necessary to meet our expenditure needs for the coming year, and we're really looking at that as sort of buying us some time to make some longer term decisions about how we move forward with the changes in school funding that were implemented this year. But just to reiterate, as Dr. White said, that's kind of a one-time fix. Once those monies are spent, they don't come back. So that is something that will allow us this time in the coming year to make some changes. So just want to put that on everyone's radar. And also make a note about capital funding. We did request and get approval from the city council on May 19th to reappropriate some of those carryover or prior year funds that were specifically intended to be used for capital projects. As Mrs. Apel shared, to reduce our reliance on borrowing so much funding that would then require some interest payments and that sort of thing. I have noted here that we'll need to request reappropriation once the new fiscal year comes on the portion of those appropriated funds that have not been spent by June 30. I actually might be wrong about that. Just before this meeting, so I acknowledge that. Just before this meeting, that was pointed out to me by one of my colleagues. That portion of state code was added this year. And so we had some internal debate about whether that needed to happen annually or whether just the one-time appropriation. So certainly we will get clarification from legal counsel on making sure that we do that correctly. So I don't know if that will be needed, but that's a possibility that depending on where we are in terms of these ongoing projects that won't be completed at June 30, making sure that we have the ongoing authorization to continue to use those funds to finish the project, so. All right. So looking ahead at where we are in terms of expenditures, I'm gonna bring you two options. I have sort of an option A and an option B. And option A, we've talked about at prior meetings. There's only one change from what I presented to you 2 weeks ago with what is included versus what is excluded from where we stand currently, and that's highlighted in green. And we have added in 4 previously grant-funded student support specialist positions. There were 7 total, if you remember, that have been grant-funded where those grant dollars are coming to an end. We have been able to find existing positions that 3 of those individuals could move into, so we only had to add the cost of 4 additional positions, and we have done that. So we have maintained those staff positions by adding those 4 to our budgeted expenditures for next year. So we do have a lot of new in this budget, which it's difficult to talk about adding things when you're talking about having a tight budget, but most of this we are required to do. So the 40 English learner teachers, as we've talked about quite a bit, is a revision to the state standards of quality. So that's based on our student numbers and their proficiency levels. I will note that updated information on WIDA scores does indicate that number might be a little bit smaller than that, maybe might be able to reduce that by about 5 positions. However, we are anticipating that our special education needs may use those additional positions. So I'm leaving it at 40 because we may have other areas based on student needs in other ways that we would need those additional positions. Enrollment is another driver, so that's why you see the 22 additional teacher positions and instructional assistants. That's based on staffing meetings that our HR team holds annually with each of our schools, looking at the enrollment projections for each school to see what needs might be there. We do have a 2.5% raise, an average raise for all of our staff included. So I'm glad to be able to include that in no small part because we are receiving partial funding for that for part of our positions from the state. So we certainly wouldn't want to leave any state funding on the table. So by doing that, we do meet the requirements for accessing those state dollars. So that's certainly important. Things that are not included in option A are 13 elementary Spanish teachers. We've talked a lot about putting that program aside so that we can make use of those employees to fill some of the significant number of new positions that we have to fill. We do have currently an increase in cost to our employees for health insurance by increasing the deductible for our HRA health insurance plan. That's something we've discussed, going from a $2,000 per individual deductible to $3,000 or $4,000 per family to $6,000 for that deductible for those plans. So that is something that is currently included in this option A. Eliminating after-school activity buses is included, a 10% reduction in our facility maintenance budget, reducing our use of individualized private transportation services in special circumstances. And then we've had a lot of conversation about the enrollment at both of our high schools, exceeding capacity there. We do not have any funds in this option for adding modular units, learning cottages at the high school. So all of these ins and outs would require just over $9.1 million use of fund balance. So adding local funding, state funding, and about 9.1 million out of fund balance would allow us to do the things that are listed in this option. So just kind of to give you the numbers visually, this is what our revenue would look like. I have the required use of fund balance there based on option A. So overall, looking at our state and local funding, we'd be looking at about a 4.2% revenue increase, and then making up that difference that would be required out of fund balance. And then the expenditure side, you see by category, just kind of what we would be looking at in terms of a year-over-year comparison to the adopted budget for the current year. Almost the highest increase by category in instruction, not surprisingly, the highest year-over-year increase is in debt service. That's just dependent on when our bond payments are due. And so that's by category, the biggest change, but no surprise that the close second there is our biggest category, which is in instruction. So now let me go on to option B. So I know we've had a lot of conversation, including at the most recent school board meeting 2 weeks ago, and have heard school board members' feelings and things that are important to our community that you're hearing from your constituents, et cetera. So we've gone back and looked at sort of a plan B, an option for trying not to cut quite so much. Again, buying us some time to evaluate our resources. So I'll just highlight here what has changed from what we just discussed on option A. We are proposing with option B not to change the deductible in our HRA employee plan. So that would keep that at the current level, at least for another year and a half, honestly, because our health insurance plans follow a calendar year. So that change, if we were to do it, would take effect January 1 of 2026. So this would not count on that for savings for the coming year. We propose in this option putting the activity buses back. Now, I will say, I know our transportation team is looking at ways that we can keep our activity buses, but maybe change how we do those routes to save a little bit of money, to keep it going, but cut some costs. So we certainly are looking at every avenue that might be available to us to make that resource available, if there is a way to do so, perhaps at a lower cost than that $125. And lastly, we've put back in the 10% of facility maintenance budgeted costs that were requested. So some points were made by school board members and others that, we can look at those as sort of one-time needs, usually when something breaks or we need to fix that. Now those things do happen every year. It might be something different. So that is why that's something it's important for us to budget for every year. But point well taken in terms of if we're going to be using sort of one-time funding, that does not feel like an inappropriate way to make use of those. So all of that in would increase our budgeted use of fund balance to $10.3 million. So adds a little bit more than $1 million in terms of use of fund balance. So just gonna let you see kind of the numbers of what that looks like. Again, nothing on this slide changes except for that required use of fund balance, which goes up. I will note the total there, you see the total general fund budget, $272.27 million. So we're still within that limit that we have to stay under in terms of what has been authorized by City Council. So we're still okay in that area, even with looking at adding those expenses back that were just described. So looking at our expenditure categories, how that would change in our option B. So increases in the transportation area, a little bit, of course. most in our instruction with health insurance and stuff. That's where the bulk of our employees are, so we see that there in terms of changes to the budget. So let me take a minute, and we've talked a lot about fund balance and how we would rely on that, of what that would really mean. And this slide is using that second option, that option B, of what that would look like. So our opening balance for the beginning of this current fiscal year of unassigned fund balance, plus we had $5 million assigned to help us with transitioning away from all of that federal pandemic relief funding. So that adds up to just over $28 million. We do have a portion of that that is not spendable, that is assigned for other purposes, so we can't use that. We budgeted to use just over 1.7 million this year. So if we need to use that, which is safest to assume we will at this point, that would have our projected available fund balance at just over 26.1 million at the end of the current year. Now, as we discussed, we have the current school board policy requiring a portion of that be set aside and not used unless there's specific action on the part of school board to authorize that. So that policy requires that amount to be 13.3 million for next year. So that brings our potentially available to spend portion down to 12.8. So we are proposing, if the school board likes option B, to use about 10.3 of that. That would leave just under 2.5 million in fund balance above and beyond that required reserve. So I do have a note on here. Of course, there's very different opinions and information coming out of the city about our availability of fund balance. So I just wanted to acknowledge that without any specific changed policies or information about cash flow responsibility and that sort of thing. This slide is based on how things have been and school board policy as it exists currently, that sort of thing. So just wanted to acknowledge that. So just kind of a final comparison, just to give a summary so that you can sort of see the ins and outs of both plans. So of course, a whole lot of it is the same between option A or option B, but we do have some reductions in A that we have backed out of B. So that's certainly beneficial. Neither plan has funding available for learning cottages at the high schools at this point. And then you see the variance there between those two options of what would be required out of fund balance to move forward with that budget. So I will, oops, I don't know what I did. Can you bring that back up? I'm sorry, I don't know what I hit. Just sort of last, kind of what are next steps to put that on the table. So of course, we will be working over the next few days to finalize our detailed budget for you so we need to have that electronic version available to post with the agenda the middle of next week so that you have plenty of time to be looking at that. We will of course have hard copies at your seats on June 10th for that meeting. And that detailed budget, if you've received it before, it's a pretty big book. It includes a lot of background information, an explanation of our financial processes and policies, and any laws or regulations at the state level or local level that kind of govern our timeline and how we build our budget. So that the intent really is to have everything kind of a one-stop shop so that a user can take that one document and understand kind of how did we get here, how do we build our budget, that sort of thing. It will have projected grant funding in there. It will have our capital improvement plan, which I know you've already received, but again, just as an attempt to have everything that a user might need all in one place. And then some supporting data and information we always have in there to, again, kind of put things in context. And those are based on best practice standards that are established by the Association of School Business Officials that we always work to make sure that we're meeting those standards and providing appropriate detailed information for the community's use. So So that is where we are, and I will, certainly, I'm happy to take any questions, but I need to leave this meeting with some guidance from you about our two options that are on the table to make sure that I bring you the budget that you are comfortable with ultimately for your approval. So I welcome any questions or comments and opinions at this point.
And to be clear, we're not voting on which option we're going with. We're just still providing feedback
Yes,
to
thank you.
help guide Ms. Jackson's team. So
Just want to make sure that we do, when it is time to vote, that I'm bringing something that, that is what the board is expecting.
Can you go back to the comparisons from option A and B? Right, that one right there.
Yes.
So I think we'll start with Ms. Trigg. If you had any comments or questions about where this stands?
Yes, I do like that we are able to consider some of the options that will not cause our staff more out of pocket. Well, it's not even out of pocket, it's actually the deductible. My mind is all over when it comes to health insurance,
Well,
but yeah.
I mean, depending on the needs of the employee, it
Yeah.
certainly could be, if that, with a higher deductible, there's
Because it is
more.
my out of pocket, so when I see that it's deductible, I'm like, ooh, glad I'm healthy. But yes, I'm glad that we're able to not take more out of their pockets, and especially with giving less of the raise that we were planning to give more initially. I do love the fact that we're able to try to save the activity buses as well as making sure our maintenance, because it can cost more later if we push something to the side. So I do like the fact that we're looking at some aspects that we're able to keep going, at least for this next year.
Thank you.
Ms. Watkins?
First, I want to thank you very much. What people sometimes don't understand is that we have time to ask you additional questions and digest and meet with Dr. White and just 2 board members at a time to gain a clearer understanding. I would just like the public and those viewing and listening to know that we don't make rash, instant decisions. We have time to process items, and I know a lot of this came out of our 2x2s where we asked specific questions. We asked you guys to go back and see, what can you put in? What do we have? Can we get all the way down to, the penny if we need to try to save some of our programs in our positions? And so I just want to thank you for that, and just share that I think the teams did a really good job with bringing back in some of the things that were on the table to be taken off. And personally, I would like to see option B.
Thank you.
Mr. Link?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for all of your work. This reflects a lot of our conversations earlier this week. If I didn't bring it up in the 2x2s earlier this week, I'm most comfortable with option B, mostly pivoting on 2 things. If our funding constraints this year are a this year problem, I'm scared by reducing our maintenance budget, creating a next year problem in a year. We're creating future problems by solving a this year problem. By the same token, reducing the amount of healthcare coverage that we're able to offer the teachers. I want teachers to feel, I want them to know that we want them to stay. We want them to stay and continue educating our students. And I'm afraid also by reducing that, we're also creating a next year problem and a year after that problem. So by those 2 tokens, I am most comfortable with option B. But we're talking of a swing of, it's not nothing, but it's 1.2 million. No matter what, we're spending 9 million out of fund balance with either of these options. Should city policy dictate that fund balance is not available to us for this budget? Do we have some drafts in place for what that would look like?
Well, I mean, at this point, I think we're in good stead with what we are discussing because the city council has already appropriated budget for next year for the school board. So,
Okay.
so we're staying within that level that has been
Okay.
set. So I think we're okay with moving forward for the
There's
25,
not a
26.
scenario in which we're not going to have the 9 million and now suddenly 9 million is on the chopping block.
That's included in the total that's been appropriated. So I think we're moving appropriately based on what has been authorized at this point. But any changes that might be implemented, of course, going forward might affect how we budget.
Subsequent
Because
budget
we're
years,
not planning
subsequent
to
budget years.
spend more than the 275 that has already been.
Cannot do that, correct.
Thank you.
And before we move to Mr. Cherry, Ms. Trigg, had you wanted to voice support for option A or option B? Or you don't have to, I don't want to tie you in, but I just, in case you wanted to or not.
Yes, definitely option B, in my
I
opinion.
wrote your name down by V. That's how I
Okay.
interpreted
Yeah,
it.
that's
Thank
what I
you for
interpreted too, but I didn't,
listed
but I just
everything.
wanted to give her the chance.
You already voted.
It's not a vote, is it?
Not a vote.
It's not a vote.
Mr. Cherry.
So, I guess I'm an operations guy, and we are in the people business, and we need proper buildings for the people to work. So, that being said, I think that kind of speaks for itself. Option B for me is, I think what we need to do, we need to make sure we keep, we're not doing the best raise, but we're giving them something. I think they'll be extremely grateful for that, but also I don't want to reduce costs by increasing a deductible. So, I just don't feel comfortable with that. And then our maintenance, you look at the history of our buildings, something's bound to break every 5 minutes, so we do not want to reduce our maintenance budget. I think Mr. Perkins does an incredible job with maintaining the buildings that we have and improving our facilities. So, yeah, option B. And again, thank you for the hard work. I don't think you need to hear that anymore. I think what you're wanting to hear is, hey, I need some guidance tonight. All right, I already know you all are thankful. So definitely option B. All right, so that's where I'm at.
And I also really appreciate working to keep the deductibles where they are for option B, because it was a theme even during the strategic plan feedback, about taking care of the student, the whole family, the whole division. That includes our staff. And also, I know the activity buses were a key point that a lot of people felt like for our students to access things like tutoring or various extracurricular programs, that's a necessity that we have that maybe other divisions don't. I'm also in favor of option B, but I also want to note that just because, we know that this is we're going to take a hit on the fund balance. That is what it's there for, is in times of need. But that doesn't, if on June 10th we approve this, it doesn't mean that, Ms. Jackson's team or Mr. Perkins' team or all the other team, the departments are going to stop working to explore options for additional revenue streams. I think some of the things you saw in the history of our fund balances, we ended up with more than expected for capital expenses because we got the Virginia SCAP grants, which they were not anticipated, and that helped with Preston Park and I believe Breckenridge. And then that allowed us to move forward and to deal with inflation, but stay on pace with Preston Park's construction and things like that, and to continue with capital maintenance. So, we talked about with activity buses, I'm certain that that's something that there's a lot of grants that are geared towards after-school programs for students or various ones for more. There's still a push, I think, at the state level to get, try to get some various programs for capital expenses across the state. So I also know that how our administration works is just us, once a vote happens on June 10th, that doesn't mean we stop and say, okay, well, we're set to have to spend that much down. There will be, looking into efficiencies with the activity buses or transportation or things so that, or with, our ever-driven contract or things like that, so that we can also contract our expenses where we can, so we're good fiscal stewards anyway with all the other line items. So
I think that's a really good point, and I hate to be the wet blanket, which people like to call me, but I will add, as you made me think about, you know, leaving in the deductibles at where they are at this moment. I will just give the caveat that increases to health insurance costs are they make me nervous. So I just as we will do everything we can to find cost savings as we go along, sometimes the opposite happens in the middle of the year where something comes to fruition. If health insurance increases are higher than what we currently have included in the budget, we may need to bring some of these things back to you to discuss in future. But that's true any year, that, you know, things come up mid-year and we do our best to absorb them or pivot at that point. But so I appreciate that point. But yes, we'll do everything we can to.
And I'll just
keep
chime
costs
in there
down.
just
Yep.
to say that that is absolutely right. And I just thank you for making that point. Because things do come up and we just don't know. So keep in mind that the 1 year where we had quite a few safety concerns and we were able to utilize the fund balance in order to get those 25 safety recommendations approved by the school board and implemented, and they are all done and completed because of the use of fund balance. And that was an immediate need at that time. And we were able to take action because we had that access to funds. And so just keep in mind, so this is very helpful to hear this discussion, and I just want to thank the school board for engaging in this discussion. I mean, I know it's been a long budget season, and so I just appreciate your engagement because this helps us to prepare a budget that we would like to present to you that we know that you can stand behind. Keep in mind that next year, and I know that I keep emphasizing the same point, we may not have $10 million that we're talking about. There may not be an option A or option B because then we're kind of left with the $2 million that we're reducing it down to by using this for this year. So again, next year's discussion will be quite different than this year's discussion. We're grateful that we can have this discussion this year. And we, from what I'm hearing, we'll go back and prepare the budget for you to take action on at the next meeting. But I don't want to take over the discussion if you had other things that you wanted to ask or bring up.
And I did wanted to note that two things. One, we are reassigning staff from that were originally elementary Spanish teachers, correct? Or they had
Correct.
positions, okay? And then also, even though we're moving forward and we're giving guidance, this budget still doesn't necessarily address everything that we need to do with the capacity need. So really just want the public to know that, like, we still have a capacity issue. That's still an ongoing study, but, you know, we did not allocate to make any moves on that yet, and that is a immediate need. So I just wanted to point that out and make that known tonight.
I think it's important to, and thank you for that reminder. I mean, because let's take elementary Spanish, for instance. There are two issues with that. One was kind of a licensure kind of issue. There's a staffing issue. We have a need where we have to meet the SOQ requirements for our English learner teachers, and so there's an immediate need there. There's a budget component to that, but there was also a staffing component and a licensure component that we have to meet in order for us to meet the new SOQ requirements. And then when it comes to all of these other kinds of needs, we are fortunate. I always say this is a good problem to have when you have more students than you expect, right?
Oh, yeah.
So 5 years ago, we expected kind of declining enrollment. We have not seen that. We have seen increasing enrollment. And so with that increasing enrollment, we've seen an increase in need. So the budget that we presented, remember, the original budget is where we had already planned to use, what was it, 4 million out of fund balance from the original budget that we presented. I can't even remember when that was, Kathleen. Some time ago. So because we had more need than what we had in this current year. So we're anticipating more needs. So even what we have here, I'm even thinking about maintenance, right? So even though we're talking about not reducing the maintenance budget by 10%, which is good, we appreciate that, we know that we have more maintenance needs than what we had even originally budgeted for in the original plan. So thank you for pointing that out, because we'll definitely have to keep that in mind as we move forward.
Were there any other questions or comments from the board?
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mrs. Jackson. Thank you to your team, and thank you to our central office staff. And I also wanted to say thank you, always thank you, as we're coming down the home stretch to the school year. I want to say thank you to our teachers and our principals and our staff, our central office staff, as well as our school-based staff and all of our employees for the incredible job that they've done all school year long. And just so thank you so much. I do say that we are in a people business because we are, and as you could hear from the students' comments tonight, that there was a connection. It's about relationships, and I'm just so proud of our staff for building those relationships with students and for telling us what's needed each and every day so that we can plan accordingly. And thank you to the school board for that discussion. And so, Madam Vice Chair, that ends my report.
Thank you, Dr. White. Moving on to board items, the work of the board. As you see, we are continuing on with that work, but a lot of it has been completed for this year. And as we enter a new year, we will enter into new work of the board moving forward. I also want to take a moment here to as well thank our school board clerk, Ms. Tresky, for her help with a lot of the research going into digging through old minutes and things, so that her work there was instrumental with our history of the fund balance presentation. Regarding future business, the only thing I have really of note, aside from the big dates coming next week, I haven't noted if I got a notification, is the CTE auction over? I keep getting outbid on things, so. But is the auction over? It ended while we were here, so I'll just let my kids know how it went.
Ended at 7.
Got it.
11 minutes ago.
So too late, you missed it. Wait for next year. Hopefully I got that picnic table I've been eyeing for like 3 years. So, any other future business from the board?
Just one thing I'd like to share with the group that some of you may know or may not know. But on Friday, I'll be attending the VSBA Law Conference in Richmond.
Great.
I'm using that for double duty. I'm on a task force for the VSBA for students in schools in challenging environments. And I'm on a subcommittee within that group of workforce development and CTE programs. And I'll be working with my subcommittee after the conference in person to share some of what we are doing as a school division and what we've done in our CTE space and how we've helped our city in workforce development.
Thank you. We'll make sure to get your report back out, at a future school board meeting.
Absolutely.
All right. If there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Oh, just kidding. Undo that. Can I do that? I don't know if I can do that.
I know that we normally do moments of silence during regular board meetings, but I think it's fitting that we recognize the loss of our former superintendent, Rita Bishop, during this meeting, because our next meeting is, 2 weeks away. Just to say that, I was able to work with Rita. I may be the only one left on the board, me and Dr. Jameson, that were able to work with Dr. Bishop, and many present here today have also in the past. She contributed so much to this division and so much to our city. She loved our kids. And so I just want to recognize her contributions and accomplishments as the former superintendent of Roanoke City Schools. I don't know if we want to do a moment of silence or not.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. And again, we appreciate all of her contributions that were made to the division and on behalf of the students and families of, and staff of Roanoke City Public Schools. And with that, on that note, this meeting is adjourned.
Take two.